This episode of the podcast is brought to you by our friends at Regrow, the premier cloud-based cannabis supply chain management system.
If you're a cannabis company searching for a strategic business partner to help you automate your business, scale effectively, and make the supply chain work for you, then you need to know about Regrow. Regrow is the first of its kind software that leverages components of leading ERP and supply chain systems with the necessary compliance of the cannabis industry. That's right, you'll get all aspects of regulatory compliance built in, with the added value of workforce management, inventory, SOP management, and reporting and metrics that allow for companies to scale successfully. So stop using the whiteboards, spreadsheets, and email to manage your cultivation, distribution, and manufacturing processes, and instead incorporate Regrow. Visit their website at regrow.io. That's regrow.io. Regrow, the premier cloud-based cannabis supply chain management system.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Relevant.
Hello, my fellow people of the plant. While I host the Cannabinoid Connect podcast, I'm also an avid podcast listener like you. And one thing that frustrates me from time to time is how the conversation is one way for the listener. But that's all about to change with the new app called Relevant. Relevant is an open messaging network that aims to unite our cannabis community and allow us to connect with each other. You can join live audio chat communities called Vibes, and you can discover and join any vibe you find interesting, then grab the live mic and voice your opinion freely about any topic related to the community while others join in or group chat. You can even create your own vibes for sports teams, podcasts like mine, Cannabinoid Connect, fan clubs, comedy, classes, basically anything you can imagine. So find your vibe today by downloading the Relevant app on the App Store and Google Play. That's Relevant, RELEVNT. No dead vibes, only good vibes with the Relevant app. Hello, my fellow people of the plant. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast, your favorite podcast that includes industry-facing conversations with the industry's leading experts that aim to educate and inform the public regarding the plant's endless benefits. My guest today is Matthew Mograbi. He's the U.S. National Sales Manager at Eybna. Hey, Matthew, what's going on, man?
Hey, Kevin, how you doing today, man? I'm doing great.
I'm doing great as well. Thanks so much for making time for me today.
Of course. Pleasure to join you today.
Yes, I'm excited to be really diving deep into the topic of terpenes today, right? It seems like in other episodes that where terpenes comes up, we don't really take some time to really talk through the science behind terpenes, how it affects our moods and behaviors, when it's mixed with other secondary compounds found in the cannabis plant. So before we dive into the world of terpenes, as it relates to cannabis, Matthew, why don't we kick things off and just allow the audience to get to know you and your background? Like, have you always, been in cannabis? What made you be interested in getting into the industry? And yeah, let's take it from there.
Sure. Yeah, I'll do my best to keep it short. So I grew up on the East Coast in Long Island, New York. And from very early in my teens, I had a real affinity for cannabis. At that time, the early 2000s, on the East Coast, it was very faux pas. So I didn't really understand or know how I was going to make my way into the industry, but I knew that cannabis was something I wanted to do. It's the one thing when I look back at my life, last 20 years, what have I been passionate about? It's pretty much been music, cannabis, and my now wife. So
that's a good combination of things, man. That's a good balance. Yeah.
So those were the constants for me. And, it was always, the question was, how is it going to happen? So my first professional position at a college was as an entrepreneur. I started an all natural snack food company and built this pretty much from with my parents. Actually, we started it from the ground up, working out of our garage, and expanded it to national distribution. So getting into stores like Whole Foods, Targets, Mother's Markets, Erewhon, you name it, we were there. I made during that time, towards my end of working with that business, I saw the opportunity to create an edible line because I knew how to make this product. It was organic, it was fruit-based, it was fantastic. So around 2014, 2015, I partnered up with a friend of mine and my wife, and we started a brand called Fruit Slabs. which has been in the California market since 2015. Successfully transitioned from the medical Prop 215 into recreational cannabis. Um, I did take a step back from that business when I joined the Eybna team around 2 years ago, and I had the opportunity to connect a lot of points in my personal life that were very meaningful to me. So entrepreneurship, international business, plant-based medicine, just the combination of all these things and being very integrated into the cannabis industry beyond just being a single product maker. Now it opened the doors for me to meet with manufacturers, producers, and really expand both my personal and professional networks to really begin to influence the types of products that are being created and have a real say, if you will, in the space.
Hmm. Yeah, it seems like it was a great culmination of like your previous experience, your passion for the plant, your business with the edibles, and then Eybna just seemed like a great fit, right? From all that background that you had.
100% right. So uh, you know, timing is everything, and the pieces was a fantastic opportunity that I seized, and I haven't looked back since.
Yeah. Well, I got to give you credit, man, because I am similar to you in that, like, I've always been, I mean, not always, I've been passionate about cannabis since, my athletic career ended at the first year of college. And since then, it's just been part of my lifestyle. But, from my perspective, living in Texas and whatnot, like, I didn't know really how I could enter into the industry at first, right? I knew that there was huge opportunity, but it took me a while to kind of figure out that entry point. But for you, again, you just had kind of this all was in progress, and it was just kind of a culmination and a great fit for you to enter. So tell me about your experience at Eybna. So I know that you're the national sales manager. Tell us a little bit about the company and your role.
Sure. So the company has been around since 2014. Is based in Israel, and initially actually started as an R&D company to really understand and study the cannabis plant, phytocannabinoids, and phytochemicals that are present in the cannabis plant. The first research study that the company did was in collaboration with Professor Raphael Meshulam, who is known as the godfather of THC and cannabis, and also his right hand man, a gentleman named Lumir Hanoush. So, working with these two very credible researchers and scientists really established Eybna at a high level from the get go. And moving forward into 2015, 2016, the original core members of the team flew out to Denver, Colorado for the first recreational High Times Cup, and they saw like the industry was booming like they couldn't even imagine, and they actually saw the opportunity to commercialize some of the terpenes that they've been studying, and some of the formulations they've been developing in house, and began to develop a commercial manufacturing arm of the business. So as it stands now, Eybna is as much a technology company as we are a terpene manufacturer. And we put a lot of emphasis on continued research, product development, and really pushing the boundaries of these, essentially the next generation of cannabis products.
So let's break that down, right? The different value propositions that Eybna brings to the table. You've got product development and you've got the research and development arm. So let's start with research, right? Like, tell us about some of the challenges that y'all face when it comes to research, peer review studies, and just, basic learnings of the plant due to the federal regulation.
Right. So because the company is based in Israel, there's not as much red tape, if you will, surrounding cannabis research. So it really allows us to work openly with professors, with doctors, with universities, with independent researchers and research groups. Now, the challenge really comes when we begin to migrate or attempt to migrate some of this research to the United States, because there is so much red tape, right? So I think in the last 12 to 18 months, there's been a little bit of a shift. It kind of, in my opinion, kind of started with the Farm Bill. If the country as a whole was gonna legalize hemp and CBD products, then they needed to understand more about it, right? So I think we're inching in the right direction, but as it stands, in my personal opinion, the research coming out of Israel at a minimum 10 years ahead of where we're at in the US. On the conservative side, it's probably a little bit more than that, though, to be
Yeah.
real.
No, and I'm glad you brought that point up, because I don't know if many people know that Israel is the leader when it comes to research in cannabis, due to the fact that they don't, like you said, have as much red tape and challenges in that particular area. And from my understanding, in Israel, I know that they even conduct human test trials for cannabis use, right? Not like how we do in the States and all other countries where it's, rat tests and other things.
That is correct. So Eybna ourselves, we are beginning. I'll get to this a little bit later on in the conversation, but we are beginning to do our first human trial with a very exciting terpene formulation that I think we'll touch a little bit later on. So I don't want to let the cat out of the bag just yet. However, one of our close partners in Israel is a company called Cannasol Analytics. Cannasol is led by a professor named Dr. Dedi Meiri, who is a leader in cannabis research and also cancer research. And Cannasol's group is the group that is actively doing clinical trials on humans in Israel.
Wow. Yeah. And I definitely want to talk more about that. And I would imagine those human trials that y'all are doing in Israel, that's why it's so difficult to kind of bring that information and those findings to the US, simply because they dismiss those studies, right?
Correct. Yeah, that's exactly right. And like I mentioned, we are working on migrating the research over. So establishing partnerships with various universities, independent organizations, and the like, to really, again, migrate that research and make it more relevant to both U.S. legislators as well as the U.S. market in general.
Right. What does Israel's market look like at a high level? Like, are they more focused on the pharmaceutical side of cannabis? Or they're not rec, right? I mean, it's not legal to just recreationally use cannabis, is it?
No, so it's decriminalized. However, it is not recreational. So the Israel does have a rather unique medical cannabis program that's been in place for I want to say around at least 12 or 15 years now. So because the medical cannabis program in Israel is designed the way it is designed, it has its positives and its negatives, but it really allowed. It's a rather insular market. So what it allowed, the medical cannabis program allowed, was a lot of patient testing, data collection, recurring feedback loops. So things that were very relevant to some of the research that we were doing, as well as other organizations, because it was such a tight-knit system where, to get a medical cannabis card, you actually had to go to a true medical doctor in Israel, get prescription, have a serious condition, a little bit different than, how it was back in the Prop 215 days of California, where you walked into some, guy who was one one letter away from getting his his license removed, and just the signing, oh, you have a headache, you have migraines, insomnia, cool, you have medical cannabis card. So the patients there are, in my opinion, they're more true, quote, patients than they have been here in the States, at least in the early days of California.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, right? I mean, like, that was kind of like the phases that we've seen the rollout of the States is you first start with decrim, then you move to medical, then you're eventually adult use. But when you're in the phase of medical, and if it's a very robust medical program in that particular state, it's not too difficult to get a license.
Correct.
Right. And that's different, than you're saying, as opposed to Israel, because the focus there is really around, how cannabis and the cannabinoids can help with really serious ailments, right? Like cancer and other things.
Exactly. More. I don't mean to use the word, but a lot more like terminal conditions.
Sure.
And what's also unique about Israel is that there were only, I believe that they've expanded it, but for a long time there were only 8 licensed producers of medical cannabis. So you were kind of limited as a patient as far as to what products were accessible to you, which again kept it tight, but also wasn't necessarily the best on the patient side. But again, no program is perfect,
Right, right. I mean, Israel's program, and don't take this like completely like literal what I'm saying, but it reminds me of Texas's medical program, because Texas's program now is very limited, and they only really cater to patients who have those terminal illnesses or ailments, right? So I think that there's some similarities there. Before we talk about Eybna's product development side of the house, now that we've touched on the research, before we touch on that though, let's first just set the stage about terpenes and other cannabis phytochemicals, right? Let's just kick it off with, what are these things and how do they interact with our endocannabinoid system?
Sure. So the cannabis plant itself consists of a pretty wide variety of phytochemicals, all working together to create unique therapeutic qualities. So the research that we do and that we've been performing over the last 6 years, we collect and study these phytochemicals with the goal of applying them to a sort of a data-driven functional application in a variety of different products. Okay, what does that actually mean? Right?
Yeah, it's like that's like the press release version.
Exactly. So what are terpenes? Watering that down a little bit. So terpenes are organic compounds that give plants their smell and flavor. As far as we're aware of, there's over 50,000 unique terpenes that have been identified to date, many of which we experience on a daily basis. So if you are walking on walking your dog and you happen to walk past like a pine tree, you smell the pine, that's pinene, that's terpene that you're smelling. You go out for a hike. If there's any living botanicals in nature, you're not going into the desert, then you're gonna have some interaction with terpenes. You walk past a rose, a flower, you're eating a piece of fruit or a vegetable, there's terpenes in there.
Right. And so what you're saying basically is terpenes exist in all plant life, right? But there are specific terpenes that are found within the cannabis plant. And I believe that there's I think there's 16 terpenes that have been identified, or is there more?
To our knowledge, there's around 140 that we've identified in the cannabis plant.
Wow. Wow. So so terpenes are similar to cannabinoids in that we're still just scratching the surface in terms of identifying all of them in the plant.
Exactly. And again, taking this a step back, the research in Israel, I said it's 10 years ahead of where we're at in the US, but the research
Conservatively.
The research has been going on for over 50 years in Israel. So we have built partnerships with some of these researchers that have been studying this plant for 50 years. So, right now there's all this hot talk about Delta 8, CBD, CBV, THCV, all these minor cannabinoids and compounds, but it's like 8 of them or 12 of them. And, right now the groups that we work with have identified over 70. So again, we're at the tip of the iceberg. We're just scratching the surface here. And, THC and CBD, those are the most popular kids in the room, but there's a lot of other compounds here that over the next months and years, we'll begin to identify, we'll begin to, study and really learn more about, because we don't know a lot about this plant. As much as cannabis has been being used for thousands of years, ceremonially, recreationally, medically, we actually don't know that much about it.
What is the response from the top, the researchers in Israel who, like you said, are working every day to identify, new minor cannabinoids, terpenes and whatnot in cannabis. And then when you look at states like the US and we're, talking about THCV as a new innovative cannabinoid, are they like, we've heard about that for a while? Are they surprised? Are they unimpressed? Are they like, what's the reaction like?
It's a little bit of both. What you said, the U.S. market tends to take things and really like put it front and center and kind of just like fluff it up, pump it up, and really commercialize it. That's what we're good at. We're capitalist economy, so we're good at commercializing things. And it's just like the trends of the industry. We are that far behind, but at the same time, you know, I say we, manufacturers in the U.S. are taking these compounds that, yes, we don't know that much about, but they're not just taking the time to study them. They're taking them, they're putting into products, and they're doing more like anecdotal testing in real time with customers, if you will.
Right.
You know, so they're making formulations on assumptions or personal use and feedback, and then working with that without having any actual research or studies that are being done. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Well,
it's a funny one.
yeah, and I mean, just to add to that point, I mean, I agree with you. And I think the main driver of that is due to the lack of consumer oversight, particularly in the CBD, minor cannabinoid space outside of THC, so hemp. um, the FDA, we haven't received any guidelines when it comes to messaging claims. Is it considered a dietary supplement? So, with that lack of consumer oversight, we're just seeing a flood of all these products. To your point, that have little to no efficacy and haven't been properly tested and include labels and claims that are not accurate.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can't necessarily like knock the efficacy of these products. It's just a matter of having the validation to back it up. If something works for you, that's great. Keep using it. But if you're looking to take that and multiply it and say what works for me is going to work for you, that's where you run into an issue, because everybody is different, literally. So it's really hard to make these assumptions and presumptions about these products right now.
Yeah. And that's where I can't wait till we get to a point in this industry and even as a consumer where I have a really good understanding of my genetic makeup, my own endocannabinoid system,
Mm-hmm.
and what minor cannabinoids best interact with my biological makeup.
Yeah.
And I know that there's Endo Dna, which I've put an ad on the podcast several times about that. That's kind of, I always point to that as the only example that I see right now where someone could actually have a better understanding of that and then be informed when they walk into a dispensary or a CBD retail shop and actually know what they need to buy.
Exactly. So you mentioned Endo Dna. They're actually a partner of ours, and we work with them to really produce high quality, consistent formulations that are exactly that. They're targeted, personalized medicine. So I'm happy you mentioned Endo Dna, and Len, he's a great guy, and their team, and they are like I hate to say the word perfect, but they're a perfect partner for a company like Eybna, because they see the future of medicine and cannabis medicine as being incredibly dialed in and personalized.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, I think, everybody's ultimate goal is to find something that works for you. And what works for you, Kevin, may not work for me, Matt, because of our genetic makeup, our position or disposition. So it really it's kind of stepping into the future of products and product formulations, what the Endo team is doing, what we're doing collaboratively. So it's really interesting, and I think there's going to be some cool things coming out later this year from our group to really make products like this more available and more accessible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just shameless plug for the audience. So endodna.com/products, you get a 20% discount if you use the promo code Connect15. So just because it's relevant, and hey, I want more savvy consumers in this space, because there are adverse effects with cannabis if you don't understand what's working and what's not for you,
Mm-hmm.
um so let's switch gears a little bit, Matthew, and let's talk about the product development side of the house. So tell me a little bit about Eybna's products, how you go about your formulations, and what's on the horizon.
Cool. Yeah. So we have a lot of different formulations that we produce, and really, when it comes to the R&D side, what is most I would say most relevant and most exciting to us is this expanding on the model of biological testing to prove and develop effect-driven formulations. So what does that mean? So up until probably sometime last year, we'd been doing a handful of research studies and serious data collection, but a lot of the research that we were doing was under the realm of ethnobotanical research, which is essentially, like I was mentioning before, is more anecdotal research. So essentially, not just taking one patient and saying, "Hey, what are you consuming and what's your condition," but we're having that recurring feedback loop over 2 years with the same patient suffering from the same condition, understanding what are they consuming, what for their condition, were they consuming during the day, during the nighttime, and then has that maintained throughout the month, the year, etc. And we've
Which is typically what they would do in traditional healthcare, right? They just kind of
exactly
monitor your progress as you're on a new medication or whatever.
100%, 100%. So by doing that and collecting this data, we've built a large database of of information that we are beginning to utilize to put the pieces together to develop more effect-driven products. So a little sneak peek on what we're working on. Later this year, we're going to roll out an effect-based line that's going to include formulations that are targeted for specific conditions. Um, Insomnia, rest, recovery, energize, focus. And then the most exciting one, if you're asking me what you did, is the research we've been doing on a proprietary terpene blend we developed called NTVRL. Now, the NTVRL blend is actually comprised of 30 different terpenes, and each one independently has shown either anti-inflammatory or antiviral properties. Now, what we did here was we built this formulation and we tested it in 2 different biological settings, both of which were FDA approved preclinical trials. However, they're both done in vitro. So not via human consumption, but kind of human cells and virus cells and CBD as well with this terpene formulation in a petri dish. So the next step there is to move forward with, like I mentioned at the top of the conversation, with clinical trials in Israel on human patients suffering from coronavirus and other viral infections.
And so those tests haven't taken place yet, but that's the next phase in this process?
Correct. So we've done 2 preclinical trials, and it has positioned us for a clinical trial that will begin in the next 30 to 60 days in Israel.
And that is to determine how these terpenes play an effective role in COVID-19 symptom management. Is that what you said?
More or less, yes, but not just limited to COVID-19, but most viral infections.
Wow. So when do we expect that study to be published?
Um,
I'm already ready to read the findings. I mean,
you and me both, and I wish I had the answer for that. But the truth is, when dealing with hospitals, with government agencies and clinical trials, there is no real timeline, unfortunately. Right. We know when we have an idea when it's going to begin, and then from there it's a little bit murky. But I do want to say. Hopefully by the end of this quarter, so sometime over the summer, we should have those results to share.
Yeah. Well, hey, if that happens, and if you want to send over the study to me, I'd be happy to share that also with the audience and just spread the word, because that's very interesting stuff. So
yeah, I'm pretty confident that once that study gets published, you'll hear about it. But
yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
I will definitely keep you in the loop and share that with you when it's available.
Hey, I'm all about promoting, informative content that moves the needle for the industry. So, absolutely. So, tell me, let's go back to what you're really excited about when it comes to that product that you mentioned. Is that an isolated terpene product with no minor cannabinoids in it, just terpenes?
Correct. So it's called NTVRL, which is antiviral without the vowels. So it's a fun play on words. It's a proprietary formulation that we've actually patented, and it is a terpene only blend. So it is just highly purified, highly concentrated combination of the 30 different terpenes. And what we do here is we are aligning with various manufacturers, brands, and companies, both in the U.S. and in Europe, to put together products that will be available for the broader population and mass market for purchase. So this can include state-specific, THC partners for various product applications, as well as larger CBD partners for a broader outreach, both in the U.S. and in Europe.
So the handoff with the partners is for them to actually come up with the product formulations and the methods of consumption, or?
So we've already done all that work.
Okay.
We've been pretty hard at work here.
So what are those then? What are the methods of consumption and formulations? Like what do they look like?
Sure. So there's a handful of different product applications that are available, and some of the work that I've been doing is essentially aligning with not necessarily the brands themselves, but more the manufacturers, people who produce products, so that I can have a ratioed product and present it to a larger organization as a turnkey line extension or turnkey product opportunity for them. So some of these product applications do include, the terpene formulation independently with, to mix it into a tincture. So that's one product. Capsules is another product. Gel caps, pressed tablets is another product. Inhalers and oral sprays is also a product application. And a very unique product actually that we've partnered with a gentleman who was involved in the development of the Listerine dissolvable strips back in the early 2000s, and he has a few different patents on his product application. But the dissolvable strips with CBD and this antiviral blend is going to be coming to market pretty soon.
Is that the what is it called? Oral thin? There's like a
thin film.
Thin film, that's right. Technology, right? Okay, because I recently spoke with Rob Davidson of Cure Pharmaceutical, and he mentioned that they have that type of technology as well.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So it's a unique form factor that is becoming more popular, and for just the way that they do their formulations, there's a really high bioavailability. Excuse me, and it's a phenomenal product. I myself have been R&Ding a lot of these finished products myself, and fortunately, unfortunately, my wife and I both caught COVID towards the end of January.
Oh no.
That's the unfortunate part. The fortunate part was that we did have access to these products and formulations, so we were able to make a very quick and speedy full recovery within a matter of a few days, like 3 days, I want to say. We were back at it. And first, again, anecdotal feedback.
Well, there's the anecdotal testimony I needed. There you go. See.
Exactly. So, and anecdotally speaking, it worked phenomenally for me. Within minutes of taking an oral strip, I felt symptoms that were.
That's amazing, man. That's really amazing.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah. And everybody that I've let sample just the terpene blend themselves, and they've mixed it into a tincture or a spray or a vape application, they absolutely love it. They're like, it takes them a day or two, because if you have the expectation that this is going to do wonders for you, then you're like paying very close attention. But then when you stop paying attention to it and you continue to use the product, and you're like, why am I feeling better? Why am I all
right
breathing easier and don't have as much inflammation in my body? Well, it's because I'm taking this spray with this special blend in it. So it really works. It's a powerful plant medicine, and getting COVID actually helped me evangelize the formulation. Now I can go to the highest rooftop and scream about it, and from personal experience. So
yeah, there's nothing better than that firsthand experience. And at that point, how can anybody combat saying no, you didn't feel better after taking that when in fact you did, right? And I've said this over and over, that those N of one case studies, like what you just did, that testimony, those are the most important stories that we can promote, right? Because again, how do you combat that? I do have a science question when it comes to this terpene isolated product. And So and most people that are of the plant, they understand that THC interacts with our CB1 receptor within our endocannabinoid system, right? Which is located in our brain. And then you have other minor cannabinoids like CBD that interact with our CB2 receptor, which is within our gut, right? And kind of helps regulate like our immune system and inflammation and things like that. So, where does the terpene product fall into place? Like, is it a little of both with the CB1 and CB2? Is it primarily just CB2?
Well, because the terpenes themselves don't have any cannabinoids in it, it's really let's call it a navigation system for whatever car cannabinoid you consume, right? So if you're consuming a CBD heavy formulation, then it's gonna go to the CB2. If you're doing a THC heavy one, it'll probably go to the CB1 receptor. But terpenes, you know, they I've been saying this a lot lately. Um, they can really guide the experience, but they are not. I say that with caution. I want to say they're not the actives, but in some capacity they are the actives. You know?
When you say that, like when you say not actives, like do you mean that they don't like directly bind with the receptor like the minor cannabinoids do?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we are working on developing formulations that specifically do bind to the CB1 receptors. And we're doing research on this to see if there's a way that we can create a higher high, if you will, right? So,
Yeah.
so not necessarily in the same realm of health and wellness, but still, playing into the true potential that terpenes have when paired with certain cannabinoids in various ratios, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we can develop a formulation that, when paired with, delta 9 THC, can take something that feels like 80% and make it feel like 150%. We don't even know what that means. So that's pretty cool.
Right.
And that's the kind of things that are in our development pipeline right now.
Yeah, and those legacy states that have been adult use for a number of years now, like California and Colorado. I mean, I know that their consumers would love that, right? Because it seems like in those states, it's really racing for the high potency products.
Yep, that's exactly right. You have being in the Prop 215 days. My wife and I have dubbed the term the THC tough guys, where 100 milligrams, I won't even feel that kind of thing. So yeah, the market is dictating a maximum amount of potency you can have per product, but what can you do within that maximum potency to enhance and optimize that experience?
Yeah. No, exactly. The THC tough guys, man. I never heard that term, but I'm probably going to start using it now. I like it.
Yeah, I can see it resonates with you. I can see that.
Well, I mean, I'm not one that's like, oh, I can do it. Like I'll admit if something's really strong, but I do gravitate toward more of the higher potency products just because I've been a consumer for so long now, I think, and my tolerance level has probably increased in that time. But yeah, I like to be high, man. I like to get a good high. I do.
Yeah, no, me too. It's like sometimes 10 milligrams will get me there, and sometimes I'm like, all right, let me take another one because I didn't feel anything. So it really depends on the product, depends on the day, depends on the vibe. But yeah, I'm a hefty consumer myself.
Yeah. And that's what frustrates me so much. Again, being in a state where it's not adult use, you don't really know what you're getting. And it's like the discussion that we had, earlier about how Endo Health and Len May being the CEO, how they're a perfect partner for Eybna because both organizations are so forward thinking in what they're doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you touched on how they're a perfect partner because of what they're doing, but then you talked about data collection and how you guys go about getting these stories from patients and just trying to understand what's working for not just that one time but a number of years. So in that data collection, is there any collaboration with Endo Health, or is that solely Eybna's side of the house?
There's overlap. I don't want to get into too many details, but there is definitely overlap there. Where we are utilizing I mean, and that's part of the value proposition that we bring to the table, is that we're not just here to produce formulations for you. We're here to produce the optimal formulations based on our research and based on your research for your clients.
Right. And I always want to be balanced on the podcast, because while there are numerous benefits when it comes to the economic, medicinal, and environmental benefits of cannabis, it's an external substance at the end of the day, and there are adverse effects, right? Like going back to our points earlier, everybody responds to different chemicals differently, different compounds differently, because of our own unique genetic makeup. So from the data collection and the studies that Eybna's done, like, what adverse effects have you seen with cannabis?
Um,
And I ask, I mean, like, if there's not a lot, I mean, that's fine. I know that one term that's come up is cannabinoid hypermesis syndrome, which I know two people personally in my life who deal with that.
yeah.
You know,
So I'll be very honest. I don't have much information on that topic. I can tell you that the way that cannabis is viewed at the higher level within both our organization and my personal outlook on it is that cannabis is there to improve quality of life
hmm
for most people. If you have a specific condition that prevents you from consuming cannabis, then you don't fall into that into that bucket. But for most people
unfortunately, yeah.
yeah, unfortunately, but for most people that do consume cannabis, they're not they're not consuming it to do exactly one particular thing. Like you would take a pain medication, let's say. All right, let's give an example, right? So you said you were you played sports in college, right?
As a wrestler, yeah.
Okay, so let's say you had an injury and you broke your ankle, right? You're in a lot of pain, and the doctor prescribes you some pain medication, right? And it's going to bring your pain from a 9 down to a 4. You're like, wow, that's fantastic. But there's side effects to that. And then you start to consume cannabis, and you're like, wow, okay, it takes my pain that's at a 9, it only brings it down to an 8 or 7.5, right? So it's not getting to that full pain relief that you would find with a pharmaceutical medication. However, bringing that pain down from a 9 to an 8 or to a 7.5 allows you to do a little bit more, right? And it moderately improves your quality of life, so that when that 9 drops to a 7.5, okay, now I can put my shoes on, now I can get dressed, and then that's going to motivate you to be more active and be essentially be less lethargic about it, and then continue incrementally to whittle that down. Okay, so now I'm at 7.5, and because I'm at a 7.5, I can do a little bit more. Now that I'm doing a little bit more, my pain is actually reduced because I'm going out more, I'm seeing people, and there's other external factors that are playing to that quality of life experience.
That example makes a lot of sense. And in addition to the pain management that you talked about, there's also other benefits, right? Because like the anti-inflammation properties, all that type of stuff kind of can add to a more speedy recovery than just isolating and focusing on pain management with opioids, right?
Correct. Yeah, and then there's obviously there's like I said, there's side effects to that. There's nausea, there's
Addiction.
dependence issues.
Yep.
So it's a very slippery slope when you start to deal with prescribed medications, especially pain medications. So they're very difficult to get off of once you get on them. So yeah, so I think I hope that that
No,
example answered the question.
it does, man. And just to wrap that part of the discussion up is, with opioids, it's almost like, and I'm assuming that we're in the same generation or we're close to age, but it's like growing up, like I can tell you so many stories of just different, like, people that I knew in high school or friends even that had an injury or something happened, and then they were prescribed, opioids. And at that point, early back in the days, like, it wasn't just, here's your prescription, see you later. It's like, here is an ongoing prescription of these pills, and like you said, over time there's that dependency, and then there's a lot of different factors and things that play out, and eventually, it could lead to heroin addiction, or something more serious. So
there's I don't want to talk about it too much, but I share the same sentiments, and and it's not only the dependency though, it's having to take the increased dose also. You build a tolerance to these products very quickly, and before you know it, what one pill satiated is now turned into 4 pills, and then it's it snowballs very quickly, and it's unfortunately, I've known too many people that have dependency issues, or unfortunately have passed away because of this. I want to say that if they had access to cannabis and they had access to more personalized medicine and more options out there, it may not be that way. But all we can do now is look towards the future and do our best to craft products that that people can use, and they can use to supplement these other more dangerous and potentially deadly pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, you're right. To just try to shift our focus into more plant-based alternative medicines, and then also citing the data that we're seeing, right? I know I've seen a number of different articles talking about how opioid deaths have dropped since certain states have come online with adult use and other things. So I think that story will tell itself over time as we get more data,
And that's a real thing. It's definitely a real thing.
It is a real thing. Absolutely. Yes. So Matthew, to wrap up the conversation today, which has been great, by the way, tell us, you touched on Eybna's focus when it comes to research and development, obviously being a leader and a pioneer since the company is based in Israel, which is the leading country for research. And then also how innovative you are on your product development side. So what is in store for Eybna in 2021 and beyond?
Cool. So what's in store for us in 2021 and beyond is essentially branching out into new product applications and form factors. So we've made a handful of new partnerships this year, one with a company out of Oakland, California called Vertosa, who specializes in beverage and edible emulsions and nano emulsions.
Mm-hmm.
So for us to branch out from our typical client base and product applications, which has primarily been in the vape application or tincture application, into beverages, into consumables, and expanding that even out of the cannabinoid space and into the CPG space. So I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the year you start to see products in your local grocery store that don't have any cannabinoids but do have terpenes in them. So products like mocktails, like cocktails, like just any types of beverages that have a flavoring component to it. Don't be surprised when you start to see terpenes in these products. Another interesting thing for us this year is the collaboration with the group out of Denver, Colorado called ASAPAC, who also specializes in infusions and functional beverages. So not so much on the emulsion side, but more on the formulation side. And again, this is in the same realm as a partnership with Vertosa. They also have a partnership together. So it's a little triangle there, if you will. But again, the idea here is to begin to offer unique products to the more mainstream producers. So you'll probably start to see, if you haven't seen already, beer companies starting to put terpenes into beverages. It's really interesting stuff. And then there's also a handful of new products coming down the pipeline that I don't really want to speak about just yet, but really cool form factors that will be hitting the market soon. Different delivery methods, and essentially building platforms for us to bring some of our research-backed products to market.
Wow. Y'all sound like you have a really busy year but an exciting year. I mean, you're expanding your product line, you're jumping into different areas of formulations that can touch different consumers, because we know that there's a vast number of them, and people like to consume cannabis differently within this space, and the more that we can make these products accessible to them to enhance their lives, like you said earlier, it's a win-win,
Exactly. And like it's funny because most people, they hear about terpenes and it's kind of this buzzword, but people don't really draw the association with essential oils. And a lot of people do understand essential oils and they do understand the therapeutic benefits of essential oils, but then they can't draw that parallel to terpenes, which they're very similar. Terpenes are essentially highly refined, essential oil components to them. So, there are lots of therapeutic benefits and properties that terpenes can play and can offer independently, as well as paired with cannabinoids and playing up what's known as the entourage effect. So yeah, there's a lot of lots of fun things coming down the pipeline this year for us.
Absolutely. And speaking of fun things, I don't know if you've ever done this before, but I recently visited my business partners out in New Mexico. They have an extraction lab, and I got a terpene stash. Have you ever had a terpene stash?
I have not.
Just basically, the extracted terpene, and then they just kind of put a little dab on your front lip, and you have that nice, whether it's pinene or lemonine, you have that beautiful aroma all day.
Yeah, what I've actually been doing, which is taking that one level up, is I've been taking our NTVRL formulation, which actually smells fantastic, and putting a couple of drops on my face mask. So when I walk around, I don't have to smell my breath all day, but also I'm breathing in this wonderful smelling blend that also has antiviral properties to it. So it's like it's almost like I have this invisibility cloak over me, while still getting this fantastic aroma and experience throughout my day.
Right. When before that, the product anecdotally helped you with COVID-19. So there's just so many benefits even after as well, even wearing a mask, And I thought I was cool doing a terp stash, but see, you had to one up me with the mask. So I might have to copy that idea now, Matthew.
Yeah. Now you know.
Right on, man. Hey, well, it's been fun to talk with you today. I've learned a lot. I know the audience has learned a lot. Where can people find Eybna's website and social media if they want to learn more?
Sure. So, we are a B2B company. So our social media is still being, we have it. It's on Instagram at Eybna, Eybna. It's not as hot as it will be in a few weeks, but if you go to our website, eybna.com, eybna.com, it is a treasure trove of research, of information, and a lot of different learning tools to help people, advanced and novices both, learn about terpenes, learn about terpene applications, learn more about these compounds, where they can be found, what they look like, what they smell like. A really cool tool that we've built out on our website is called our terperiodic table, which is a play on the periodic table, and it's pretty much around 100 different compounds that we've put out there on our on the table, and you can click on them, you can learn more about them, and it's a really fun interactive experience to just to bring yourself up to speed and get more familiarized with terpenes and how awesome they are.
That sounds like a really good resource. I'm definitely going to check that out also. So thanks for sharing that, Matthew. Really appreciate it again, man.
Of course. I'm looking forward to being back on the show at some point in the near future to talk about our research. But until then, feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. There's a direct contact link on our website. And looking forward.
Yeah, you beat me to it. I definitely want to have you back on. Let's talk about those findings whenever that study's published. All right.
100%.
Cool. Well, thank you so much again, Matthew. And thank you all for listening. Bye.
Thank you.